And we're back, right, so where was I? The factions. The factions, yes, I haven't even got to the factions yet, wow. So I'm actually thinking 6 factions, and you guys are going to start to see a theme of what this game is going to be all about, how it's going to play, and the general mentality this game is going to have towards your soldiers. So there will be 6 factions, and you can join any of the factions, but joining them means submitting to them. This isn't an alliance. When you join them, an emissary or sub-ruler, whatever you want to call it, will join your convoy to enforce whatever rules they set. I'm not sure what happened to the emissary during like a base defense or something. I'd imagine like in XCOM your named characters, Shen, Varlin and Bradford, they're just off camera. But the point is, joining a faction will make the game easier because it will give you access to that faction's tech trees. But of course, as I said, you have to abide by their rules. You're joining them, you're submitting to them. And of course, each faction will be exclusive to the others. You can't join multiple factions, but joining them won't be a simple case of finding them. You will need to reach a certain tech to be able to talk to them and then do an objective for them to then be allowed to join them. As for whether you can leave that faction after you joined, I don't know. That might defeat the purpose. Maybe, just maybe there might be a really late game tech that allows you to disconnect from that faction, but it leaves you really weakened because you will lose access to all of their technology, all of their research trees, stuff like that. And to be clear, you don't have to join, although as I said, it will make the game a lot easier. In fact, on some of the high difficulties, it would almost feel mandatory that you have to join, where your troops are getting more and more desperate, and you need that leg up in power to hold your own, and not to mention it'll be one less faction you have to fight. But to be clear, the true ending of the game will be achieved when you don't join the other factions, whereas each of the factions will have their own lesser ending. And also be aware you can get a faction's tech without joining them, but it'll be a lot slower and more expensive, requiring multiple captures of technology and people just to get a single tech. So say for example, to get a Psi ability, joining the Psi faction gives all of your soldiers access to the entire tree. They just need to rank up to get the other Psi perks, whereas if you don't join them, you can get Psi abilities, but it'll take several researches and multiple captures and maybe even building tech just to get a single Psi ability on a single soldier. And that goes for all of the technologies, all the researches of all the factions. It can be done. Theoretically, you could get all of them at the same time, but it's just not viable to do. Having said that, it is the only way to mix and match technologies by not joining a faction. You could theoretically have a psionically enhanced, genetically enhanced, undead blood magic wielding mech trooper with a pet. You could do that, but is it really going to be viable to spend that much time trying to get all of those techs individually? I'd imagine you'd be long defeated or long victorious before you'd be anywhere near getting all of their technologies via stealing them. But as I describe these factions, you're going to get a feel of what the game is like. I want this game to be about sacrifice. So let me give you an example. You stumble into a region, maybe on a mission or just on the geoscape, and several of your troopers get poisoned. Now the quick solution would be to kill one of your troopers, do a full autopsy of them to unlock the antidote for the other infected troopers. That would be the quick answer to that problem. Or you can put all your troopers into cryo or quarantine and do a long research, which might require you finding items and even building tech to then save everyone. That's what I want the game to feel like. These are the kind of choices I want the game to have, like everywhere. A clear life or death, easy way or hard way choice. Another example might be like, you come across somebody that's triggered a trap, they can't move. Now this person has said they will join you and they're a decent rank, but the only solution would be to sacrifice a different soldier in their place. Now that might be viable, maybe you've got a rookie nearby. That could work, but as I said, it involves sacrificing one person for another. I want it to be kind of like Banner Saga in that way, where the choices you make can get your soldiers killed. But I want those choices to be clear, indicating what the results of those choices will be, what sacrifice will be made, and what your reward will be. You know, how much do you need this tech? Is it worth picking someone from your squad that you have there at the time to sacrifice to get it? I want those kind of choices. But now I think we should actually finally move on to the factions. The first of which will be the aliens. Yes, I know, very, very imaginative name. It's a placeholder. These aliens are going to be very much like Half-Life 2, XCOM 2 style. They're going to be controlling the remnants of mankind in the cities. So what are the benefits of joining these guys? Well, all of their tech, weapons and armor is one tier higher than what you could have. So their tier 1 is effectively like your tier 2. Their tier 2 is like your tier 3. And that goes all the way up to whatever the maximum is, say for example 5, their one would equivalently be tier 6. So that is one of the benefits. The other one being you actually get to control their aliens, which their stats are generally better than your soldiers, say by like, I don't know, 5-10%. They are superior. Not by a lot, but they are. And they have their own perk trees as well. So what is the cost? Because joining each faction will have a big cost attached to it. Remember, you're submitting to their will. And in the aliens case, joining them means leaving half of your roster of troops with them at whatever city you're at talking to them. Those soldiers that get left behind will then become non-controllable guards of that city. And before you say, oh, I'll just get a bunch of rookies before I go there, no. it will be of even ranks. So say for example, you've got 2 Master Sergeants, whichever one you pick, the other one will get left behind. And that goes all the way down the roster. If for example, you've got 3 Master Sergeants, sure you can pick 2 of them, and the last Master Sergeant will get left behind, but then also 1 soldier from the lower rank will get left behind as well in place of the extra Master Sergeant soldier that you decide to keep with you. Now, having said that though, these soldiers aren't gone forever. They can be recruited later, maybe even for free, but the number of troops that you gave up to leave behind will get replaced with alien soldiers, alien troopers. And as I said, they are slightly better, they have better stats, and they have their own perk trees, but unfortunately, there is another catch. Every squad you send out needs to have roughly half aliens mandatory as well as half humans. In terms of the story, the aliens don't trust you, they consider themselves superior, and although on the surface they say they choose to protect the humans in their cities, and they're not lying about that, not directly, the real reason is they have already experienced a rift event on their planet, on their version of Earth. Yeah, these aliens come from their own version of Earth, and the version they came from, as I said, has already had a rift event. And these aliens that phase shifted onto our world, the way they see it, the more worlds they inhabit, the less likelihood that their species will go extinct. So they're not exactly the bad guys here. They didn't trigger the rift. As to who triggered the rift, honestly, I haven't actually thought of that yet. Maybe I'll have it picked at random. Whenever you start up a new game, the cause of the rift will be different. But you know what, we'll talk about that another time. Back to the aliens though, when you join them, you'll find that you'll get a favour meter added to the screen during the geoscape. Now this favour meter, it will rise over time or when you do missions for them, but the favour will drop when you're out on a mission or when you make choices where an alien soldier gets killed, but not a human soldier with them. Essentially, if you have an entire squad wipe, no big deal. But if you lose 1 or 2 aliens and you didn't lose any humans, they're going to have a bit of an issue with that. As I said, they consider themselves superior, and the idea of them dying and the humans not doesn't really sit well with them. And if the favour drops low enough, a sacrifice of equal rank to the last alien that died will be forced on you. So if the last alien that died that triggered the favour to bottom out was a corporal, then you have to go through your roster of soldiers and pick a corporal human soldier to be killed as a sacrifice to reset the favour meter. So yeah, that's the alien race. As I said, this game is going to be all about sacrifice. Speaking of which, let's move on to the Dead faction, shall we? The vampire lord that resides in the Dead biome. Yes, very original. But hear me out guys, believe me, it gets worse. Firstly, as a Dead biome, all the trees are dead, and most importantly, all the living that die in that biome come back to life on death. But of course they come back to life with their stats like halved, and each time they die, they come back with even more reduced stats until they've died, say like 3 times, at which point they can't come back anymore. There's not enough of them to actually come back to life. So, what are the benefits of joining the Dead faction, the vampire faction? Well, the vampire lord, of which there'll be only one on the map, will offer to embrace, as in turn into another vampire lord, 1 single soldier, doubling or even tripling that soldier's stats, and giving them access to the death perk tree, basically kind of blood magic. Now of course, that soldier doesn't need food anymore, you know, great, and as well can raise practically limitless zombies. But, oh, you know there's a cost coming, because if you make a deal with somebody called Vampire Lord, you know you've got to give something up. And this might be too much for some people, and as I said, you don't have to join a faction, but if you decide to join this faction, the Dead faction, and get your own Vampire Lord, it requires the death of every single one of your other soldiers. Your entire roster, except for that chosen soldier, will be killed as a blood sacrifice, and that blood will be used to make a Vampire Lord. And yes, before you ask, oh, then I'll just come here when my entire roster is decimated, there will be a minimum limit of soldiers required in your roster to trigger that sacrifice. So what happens with the dozens of corpses that are now around you? Well, as I said, you can raise them back to life, and that will likely be your first action. You can turn your entire freshly dead soldiers into zombies, cutting all their stats in half, and yes, that means you can have zombie undead researchers, but as I said, all of these undead, every time they die and get rezzed again, they're going to come back on lower and lower stats, until the 3rd time they die, as I said, they stay dead. There's not enough of them to come back. Now you might be thinking, well, that means you could very quickly get a stupid number of soldiers in your roster, doing research, construction, that kind of thing. But all undead you can have, of which, as I said, you can raise any living creature, they can only survive for 1 month before they, let's just say, expire. They deteriorate. And maybe even every time they die, their lifespan they have remaining, that gets cut in half as well. So what about that freshly made Vampire Lord? Of course that person's gonna need blood. They don't need food anymore, your vampires don't need food anymore, but but blood is going to be a problem. And sure, blood will regen your health. You might also want to click the blood indicator and turn the health regen off to preserve as much blood as you can so as not to starve. And I'm sure one of the powers a vampire will have will be like rapid healing, spending even more blood to inefficiently heal. But running out of blood, of course, will cause starving, and unlike with humans, which makes no sense, but you know, gameplay wise is fine, that will cause damage, which can of course result in death. But like the zombies, when the vampire dies, they come back to life simply with reduced stats. Not as much as the zombies, not cut in half, but reduced nonetheless. And when they die 3 times, then they're dead permanently and it's the end of the campaign. How you regain those lost lives, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe overfeeding, or just your lives come back over time. And of course, I've got to mention the vampire obviously can't go out during the day. That's also an issue, but that's not to say they're useless during the day. They can command missions during the day in a command vehicle they travel to the mission in. They can be there on site casting spells and buffs, and honestly maybe it can even exit the vehicle during the day, but only for 2 or 3 turns while taking damage before it needs to get back under shade or back into the vehicle. Now, let's talk about the nature faction. All the animals, which at this point after the Rift event, most of them are alien now, are under the influence of a guiding entity, say Gaia or whatever other elvish sounding name. The name's irrelevant. The point is, all it wants is, as you'd imagine, for nature to rule. It doesn't want to rule over them, it just wants them to be free. So maybe it's almost like a combined consciousness of all the animals, somehow maybe due to a mutation or whatever essence has triggered it. But let's talk about the benefits of joining them. Of course, joining with them allows bonding telepathically with animals. Yes, this will be the Pet Master faction, because of course there had to be. This will essentially double your soldier count. So instead of 8 soldiers on a mission, you'd have 16. So what are the costs? Because, you know, joining a faction has its costs. When an animal dies, the soldier that was telepathically linked to will get panicked for a couple of turns and will be left with decreased stats for like a week, maybe depending on the difficulty. After that cooldown period, that soldier will then be able to bond with another animal. But on the flip side, if the soldier dies, you retain control of the animal, if only being able to do moves, or maybe you're allowed to do like a basic attack with it, but if it survives, it can be bonded to another soldier immediately. This of course puts the priority of the survivor being the animal and not the soldier, like with the alien race, encouraging the player to keep the aliens alive and not the humans. Now obviously having more animals means your roster of troops needs more food, and as for forcing any rules on the player, I'm not sure. Maybe you require a certain number of bonded animals based on the number of troops you've got. Maybe like 50% of your troops need to be bonded with animals, and if you're below that number, everybody gets a debuff, maybe like 10% stats, or maybe when you first join, you're given it enough animals to bond with half your troops, and then if you go below that count, you get a debuff. I think that'd be a fairer way of enforcing that. And then how bonding with an animal will work. So it's going to work similar to captures. You use KO damage weapons, you get them unconscious, and then how difficult it is to bond with the creature will be dictated by how good the creature is. And if you fail, the creature might try to run or attack you, but if you kill the creature, I'm not going to have there be a penalty. The leader of the faction, whatever you want to call it, the entity, the essence, it will just consider it to be like a natural instinct for the animals. It's fine, it died, no problem. But like with so many other things, the animals themselves will have their own minor perk trees, which could involve giving buffs to either the squad or the soldier, or even giving perks to the animal or the soldier it's bonded to. And then as for food, I'm not sure whether there should be another rule prohibiting hunting animals for food. That would be kind of tricky considering you need more food, or maybe have it so that herbivores just graze off the land. They can slowly consume the food value each tile has as you pass through it, or maybe carnivores can only eat humanoid corpses, encouraging aggression against enemy factions. Yeah, I'm not sure about that last food bit. It will depend on the balance. Simply requiring more food might be enough of a cost. And then we've got the mutant faction. You guys can already picture what this is going to be. If you've seen my Cataclysm Let's Plays, then you know exactly what's going to happen. But let's first off start with a quick description about them. Just off the top of my head, let's just say there was a scientist. He concocted a serum based on alien compounds that made it through the Rift event, and after taking the compound, it caused wild mutations. They now use those mutations to adapt and survive, and they force everyone they come across to take it. So what are the benefits of joining them? Well, you get the serum. That's good, right? And that leads to unlocking separate mutation skill trees. So what's the catch? Because of course there's going to be a catch. Well, the catch is, as I said, everybody has to take the serum. All of your soldiers, every single one of them, they get the serum. And as a result, they get 6 random wild mutations. Maybe 8, I'm not sure. But the point is, half those mutations will be positive, picked at random, and half of them will be negative, picked at random. Now, as for actually unlocking the mutation skill trees, well, all of the soldiers will have a certain number of what's called hidden core DNA, and that will lead to unlocking mutation paths like rat, bird, lizard, canine, fish, that kind of thing. And the number of different core DNA that they'll have will be picked at random, say between 2 and 5 per soldier. And although you can see that they have it, each one will just be 3 question marks. As they rank up through their normal perk tree, going through the ranks, 1 core DNA at a time will become visible. And at that point, you can then research that core DNA. And only people that have that core DNA can head down that secondary perk tree. But there is one last catch to unlocking that individual perk tree. Say for example, you want a very basic one like the rat mutation perk tree. To actually unlock it, after you researched it, you will need to sacrifice 2 or 3 or 4 soldiers, depending on the difficulty, who have that type of core DNA. So if in your entire roster you have 10 people that have the rat mutation, to unlock it and make it available to everyone, 2 or 3 or 4 of those soldiers that have that rat core DNA will need to be sacrificed to complete the research to unlock it for everyone else, with of course the better core DNAs being rarer. And as for the negative wild mutations, when you actually go down the perk tree of a core DNA type, the negative wild mutations get removed. Basically, you're kind of stripping out your DNA. Now, you can undo the mutation skill tree, allowing you to then pick another core DNA, assuming that soldier actually has it and the research is unlocked and the right people have been sacrificed, but to undo a perk tree will be costly. And on top of that, it will give you back a number of random negative wild mutations. And of course, those wild mutations will slowly disappear as you rank up in another core DNA perk tree. And then, of course, we've got the mechs. We're on our 5th faction out of 6. So honestly, the mentality of the mechs is going to be pretty similar to the mutants, with the difference being the mutants believe survival happens just from random mutations, you let it happen, you accept it, whereas the mechs, they believe it's more via hard work. Of course, using technology to come up with more specific answers to survival needs. So what are the benefits of joining them? Well, soldiers, of course, can become mechs, even going so far as to be transplanted into a non-human style machine, so think giant spider-bot. But that's after you've done so many upgrades, you're essentially just a human brain in a robot suit. So what is the catch exactly? Well, the catch is, in a method to encourage your soldiers to become mechs, if you join the mech faction, all of your soldiers will lose 1 limb that you have to pick for each soldier. So you've got a sniper, and you don't want him to lose one of his arms, then get rid of one of his legs. Now, of course, they're not going to leave all your soldiers missing a limb. They replace all of the limbs you removed, that you have picked and removed, I have to specify, with an inferior mechanical limb. And by inferior, I mean it'll give you a slight stat penalty to whatever that limb is tied to. This will then encourage you to do whatever researches you need to do to replace that inferior limb to be something the same or ideally better than what you had before. And of course, that can be done with all your limbs and your body, your brain, your eyes, to the point where, as I said, once you're just a brain, you can be transplanted into something not humanoid anymore. Unfortunately, that is not the only catch that mechs have. Mechs will need power. They'll need to consume fuel or some sort of power source, and they can't function without it. If you don't have enough power for a mech, they will stop being functional. And of course, you can choose where the power goes to, almost like handing out meals. Maybe you don't want to power all your forces at the same time because you can't afford to. But the problem is, a full mech, basically only a brain, although it doesn't require food anymore, when a full mech runs out of power, it actually dies. So once you get to the point of having full mechs, you need to make sure you have your power sources all completely sustainable. And your tech, as a result, of course, is going to be heading towards not just better limbs, but more sources of power. And of course, the more limbs you have in a soldier, the more fuel that soldier requires to power those limbs. And limbs and the power source they run on, they're all interchangeable the same way armor is. So you can mix and match limbs, at least while the soldier is still humanoid, between other soldiers that have already replaced that kind of limb. That way you can make custom soldiers on the fly. So say, for example, you want a flamethrower, then get XCOM style flamethrower arm. And now, lastly, the final faction I have in mind, the Parasites, the Hive Mind. What are the benefits of joining them? Well, these guys are the Psi users. If you join them, all your soldiers get access to the Psi tree, no one gets left behind, but what is the cost? Well, obviously, having a parasite implanted is mandatory, and what this will do, it'll average all of the stats across all of your soldiers. So all your soldiers have the same aim, they'll have the same mobility, they'll have the same will, all the same health, all the same engineering and science skill, but this will be based on proximity. Basically, all your units on the same tile of the map, they'll have their stats averaged. So your squad that goes on a mission will have their stats averaged between themselves and not with the people back at base. So where does the sacrifice come in? Because there is always a sacrifice. Given how it averages everyone's stats, this encourages killing weaker soldiers, because in turn, it will raise everybody else's stats. And even worse, when you join, this is enforced. When you join, you'll have to pick 3 or 4 or 5 of your 10 worst soldiers, and worst in terms of stats, taking into account rank, which will show on their character screen. A stat will be green, yellow, or red to indicate if it's above or below average, and when you join, you'll have to kill that many of your worst soldier. And of course, removing the parasite kills the host, as you'd imagine it would. But if the host dies, the parasite will live, and on a mission can even be controlled, allowing that parasite to then capture a different humanoid unit. So yes, the parasite faction can actually capture aliens, and given they have higher stats, that might be something you want to do. But of course, you can't forcibly remove the parasite from a soldier with the intention of doing this. What you can do though, is letting a rookie die next to an alien so that parasite can take over the alien. but critical hits hit the parasite, not just the soldier. And if a critical hit is the shot that kills the unit, the parasite actually dies, as well as the soldier, of course. At which point, when a parasite dies, all of your soldiers on the mission get a temporary debuff, like they take a hit to their stats. And these parasites are kind of limited. You can kind of create and grow new ones as your tech progresses, but they are limited, they're not infinite. And also, I need to point out, this faction actually grows its own creep, almost like a spider web. And while standing on it, your soldiers will get a slight bonus to their psi power. As for who the leader is, I don't know, maybe a Hive Queen or something similar. And also I've got a side note here, maybe have the psi attacks tied to their awareness bar, their consciousness bar. But that is all the factions. Well, not entirely. I do have like a lesser faction in mind. Basically, after the Rift event happened on Earth, it got the attention of an actual true alien race. Think XCOM style sectoids. Now rarely you will come across a landed flying saucer, and when you approach it, flash a light, it's gone. Now as you progress through your tech tree, you will gain the ability to try and engage those aliens. Bearing in mind they're so far advanced, even though they don't want to get involved in a conflict on Earth, they are a serious danger. But if you can stall them long enough when you encounter them via a combination of different technologies, they could potentially leave behind a single piece of very rare tech. As for outright capturing one, I don't know, maybe. We'll have to see about that. And so, what are we going to call this game? Well, I don't know, Shattered Earth, Fractured Earth, Sacrificing Earth? No, it's too many syllables. Something along those lines. I think either Shattered Earth or Fractured Earth is taken, not by a PC game, but I think a D&D style game. And yeah, Sacrificing Earth, that is way too many symbols. Something similar though. Maybe something with sacrificing in the title, although not really sure how YouTube would handle a game called Human Sacrifices, because that's what I'd imagine this game has been given the impression of. So, after I don't know how long this video has been, what the hell have I been talking about here? Well, I've recently started using Godot, or Godot, as people have been calling it. It is a game engine, similar to Unity in some ways. I've been learning how to use it. Now, I am not great at it. I don't have any training in C++ or C# or Python. Granted, Godot uses GDScript, its own programming language, which apparently is very similar to Python, and it can also use Python as well as C#, but I have no experience in it at all. Well, like a month's worth. So, hypothetically, how long would it take a game like this to be made, with, say, cel-shaded graphics in a 3D environment with this level of complexity? For an experienced developer, I would say about 5 years. For me, a bit longer than that, I think. And I know somebody's gonna ask. So I'm gonna say this now. Oh, Mickey, that sounds awesome. You should do a Kickstarter. What are you thinking? I've heard so many nightmare stories about Kickstarters, and I would only even consider a Kickstarter if, after a year of using something like Godot, I know how to do all the technical challenges required to make a game like this. The AI, the map generation, saving map elements, like items you've left on individual map cells, so when you go back there, they're still there. This long list of technical problems, I wouldn't even consider that I could make a game like this until I know that I can overcome all of them. And this actually goes hand in hand with people saying, hey, you know what, I know Python, C#, I'm actually using Godot right now. I would be happy to help you out. Again, no. I don't want to waste anybody else's time until, as I said, I know that I can overcome all of those technical hurdles. What I will be doing though, besides doing a couple of hours on Godot every day, I'll be adding a room on the Discord for anybody that wants to talk about this game. Maybe even add a second room to talk specifically about the programming for a game like this. So guys, I'm going to do an update video to this in, say, like 2 weeks. Let anybody else know about this video if they're interested in these kind of games. And if you've got any questions about things that I've left out, or ideas on how to get mechanics to work better with one another, let me know in the comments below, and I'll answer all those questions in that follow-up video. And guys, I really don't like saying this, which is why I very, very rarely do say it. I do have a Patreon. If you want to donate anything as encouragement for my, let's just say, self-tutelage, feel free if you're able. In the meantime though, guys, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more info or playlists of games that are kind of similar to this one, and as I said, let anybody else know if they'd be interested as well. Thanks for watching guys, and bye-bye everyone. Bye-bye.